All right, great to see everyone. Today, we are going to talk about epistemology. Now, I'm going to put the word up here behind me so that you can see how it is spelled. Epistemology, if you're wondering what in the world I am talking about, you are not alone. For quite a while, I kept hearing this word, and I had no idea what it meant, and I actually couldn't deduce what it meant by the context of the conversations where I heard the word. So, naturally, just who I am as a person, I had to look it up. Epistemology is the study of knowledge, specifically the nature of knowledge. To simplify this, the field of epistemology aims to answer questions like, what is knowledge, and what does it actually mean to know something? Now, I know what you might be thinking. People sometimes get frustrated with me because I am into philosophy. Now, I'm not a philosopher by any stretch, but I do enjoy philosophy, and epistemology falls into the world of philosophy. What's funny is that philosophers also get frustrated with me. So how did I end up with people on both sides of the spectrum getting frustrated with me? Well, philosophers, they get frustrated with me because while I actually really love philosophy, I think philosophy can complicate things unnecessarily. And so I think that philosophers have a tendency to disregard common sense and make things so complicated that they end up rejecting simple truths that we all just understand and know intuitively. And then those who don't like philosophy, they get frustrated with me because of the fact that I'm even into philosophy at all. But I do think that it is valuable. I think that it serves a purpose. And my goal is to convince you of that today. All right, here we go. I am going to show you a picture right now that I took while I was in Turkey earlier this year. What you see here is the entrance to the Library of Celsus in Ephesus. This was built in 117 AD. Now, for those of you who took the beginning Greek class that we offered at the church, and anyone else who's here who knows Greek, you will appreciate what we're about to look at because you will probably be able to read it. And quick side note, for those of you going with us to Greece next spring, you'll be excited to know we're actually going to be visiting Turkey as well, specifically Ephesus, so you're going to get to see this in person with your own eyes. And seeing it in person is always way better than pictures. And by the way, I just realized this past week via my own wife, that many of you who are going to Greece did not realize we're also going to Turkey. My wife had no idea, so I thought I would mention that. So again, this is the entrance to the Library of Celsus in Ephesus. This is the exact same city of Ephesus that is mentioned in the Bible. The city of Ephesus has been thoroughly excavated, and I was able to even walk in the theater, which is mentioned in Acts chapter 19, where thousands of people shouted, "Great is Diana of the Ephesians," for 2 hours. Diana was the Greek goddess Artemis. As you can see in the picture, there are 4 statues of women at the entrance to this library. What we're going to do now is we're going to zoom in to the far right statue. As you'll notice here, there is a Greek word below her. There's technically 2 Greek words, but the first Greek word below her reads what? Episteme. That is the Greek word episteme. So you see, learning the Greek alphabet does come in handy. Now episteme is the Greek word for, you guessed it, knowledge. And I think we would all agree that knowledge is a great word to have at the entrance of a library. What better place to go to obtain knowledge and to learn than a library? Especially when the library is built in 117 AD before the internet and digital resources. Now, each statue of the four women, they all have a Greek word under them, and the other three are the Greek words for wisdom, intelligence, and excellence. So add knowledge, those are the four words that they wanted to represent through these statues at the entrance to the library. And I think we'd all agree those are very fitting words for a library entrance. So, what is knowledge? What does it mean to know something? It seems obvious, right? You almost just know what it means to know something. Well, interestingly enough, it is believed that every language in the entire world has a word for know. K-N-O-W. Now, that might not impress you until I tell you that it is also believed there are only 100 words that are universal in that sense, meaning in every single language in the world. So, know or to know is a very privileged word, and it's clearly important if it's found in every single language. Every single language, they wanted to be able to communicate what it meant to know something, to have knowledge. Now, I'm sure we've all heard the phrase, knowledge is power, right? Well, that's great, but what is knowledge? How are you going to get the power if you don't know what knowledge is? You got to figure out what knowledge is first. Now, I think, obviously you don't have to do this right now, but I think if you really ponder what knowledge is and what it means to know something, I actually think you're going to have a difficult time explaining it. I think you're going to struggle to put words to it and to try to explain it to someone else. Now, that's not a bad thing. That's completely fine. Because again, I think there is a common sense, intuitive reality that we simply know what knowledge is. We just know what it means to know something. But philosophy rears its ugly head, right? Philosophy likes to take a closer look and likes to go deeper into these things, and I actually think it's a very helpful exercise. But as you will see in some examples that I'm going to give, diving deeper into the topic of knowledge has actually driven people crazy. I'll mention this now as a tangent. Many of you have heard Tyler Vela, who is someone that I've debated multiple times. He renounced his faith. He renounced Christianity this past week. There was a rumor going around that he did. He made it public online. He wrote about it. There's a ton of people talking about this. He was very prevalent. He had this podcast and this Facebook page and all this stuff. There's a lot of questions as to why he renounced his faith. Most of the commentary that I'm reading is attributing it to his Calvinism. And I think that that's definitely plausible, right? My theory, though, is that it was philosophy. He was very, very, very deep in philosophy. And I think if you go so deep in philosophy, you literally drive yourself crazy and you don't even know what to believe anymore. All right, so let's go back in time. How far back should we go? How about Plato? Plato wrote a dialogue in 369 BC called Theaetetus. And in Theaetetus, he discusses knowledge, this topic, and he discusses the nature of knowledge. Now, I actually did a lot of time researching this, spent a lot of time researching this, and it's debated whether or not Plato actually believed what I'm about to tell you, but regardless, it's pretty much agreed across the board that Plato laid the groundwork for what people believe today what knowledge is, okay? So what did he say? He said to know something, you must first believe it. To know something, you must first believe it. And if you don't believe it, then you don't know it. That's point number one. I think he's right. That makes sense to me. So for example, if you don't believe the earth is a sphere, then you don't have knowledge that the earth is a sphere, right? And just so you know, there are still flat earthers all around the globe. Next, Plato said that in order to have knowledge, your belief must be true. You must first believe it, and then your belief must be true. I think he's right again. If you believe something that's false, why would we call that knowledge? We wouldn't, right? How can you say that you know something if it's not even true? So imagine this. This is going to sound crazy, but I did that on purpose to drive the point home. Imagine someone comes up to you and they say, I know 2 + 2 = 5. Doesn't that sound weird? If they said it, you would just like say, what? That sounds strange. What would you respond by saying? You would respond by saying, no. You think 2 + 2 = 5. Or you would say, you believe 2 + 2 = 5, but they don't know 2 + 2 = 5. Why? Because it's not true. Now, they can think that if they want to. They can actually believe that as well, but since it's not true, this is important, they don't know it. Okay? It's not knowledge. Finally, Plato said that in order to have knowledge, to truly know something, your belief must not only be true, but it also must be justified. This is where we're going to start to get into philosophy. So what does justification mean in this context of trying to figure out what knowledge is? Well, without getting too technical, Plato was essentially saying that your reason for having your true belief must be a valid reason. So you must have an objective rationale for holding your belief. That's what justification means. Well, what does that even mean? Well, for starters, it means that you can't be guessing. Okay? You can't simply be guessing. Are guesses sometimes right? Of course, right? Guesses can be right. And so if your only reason for holding to a belief was because you were guessing, and your guess just so happened to be correct, Plato said we can't call that knowledge, because that belief, while true, was not justified, as it was just a random guess. Here's an example to drive this point home. Imagine there's a contest where the participants have to guess how many gumballs are in a big jar. Okay? And the person whose guess is the closest to the actual number of gumballs without going over, they win the jar. Well, someone might guess the exact right number. And imagine if that person was so confident in their guess, they proclaimed before the correct answer was announced, I know my answer is the right answer. Plato would say this is not knowledge, because even though the belief that his answer was correct turned out to be the exact right answer, there was no valid basis for claiming the knowledge. It was just a guess. So Plato's definition of knowledge has become known as the JTB theory of knowledge. JTB stands for justified true belief. So now, if you ever hear someone mention epistemology, if you hear them mention JTB, you're going to have an idea of what they're talking about. So hopefully that's at least helpful. Now, as far as I can tell, Plato's definition of knowledge, I'm emphasizing Plato here for a second, a justified true belief is essentially widely accepted to this day. That's pretty incredible, right? Going all the way back to 369 BC. We're talking about well over 2,000 years. Now, I'm going to push back, no surprise, right? I'm going to push back against Plato and the JTB theory of knowledge. I don't think he was fully correct. But first, we need a little more history. A man named René Descartes comes along in the 1600s, and he starts to really contemplate what knowledge is, and it was his goal to figure out what we can know with absolute certainty. And he struggled. He struggled to find anything at all that he felt we could know with certainty. And then one day, he came up with something. He came up with cogito ergo sum. Cogito ergo sum. You know that Latin phrase better as, I think, therefore I am. Now, this phrase, I think, therefore I am, has become one of the most well-known philosophical statements. But unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, trying to determine what knowledge is exactly has driven some people mad. I learned in my research that Descartes meant something by I think, therefore I am, that is not obvious by the phrase. He was not convinced, you ready for this? He was not convinced that he actually could know that he existed in his bodily form. The phrase, I think, therefore I am, that he came up with actually meant to him, to Descartes, that he was just a thinking thing. That's it. He was a thinking thing. And so he actually concluded that the external world all around him might actually be an illusion, say from an evil demon. Kid you not. And so today, you'll sometimes hear people utter the phrase, I'm going full Cartesian. And what that means is that's referring to Descartes' doubt of practically everything around him. That's what going full Cartesian means. You doubt everything around you. Now I'm going to go forward to 1963. Some of you were around in 1963. A man named Edmund Gettier, he comes along and he challenges the notion of JTB. This is a big deal. He pushed back on the perceived general consensus that knowledge is a justified true belief. I'm telling you right now, this sent shockwaves through the philosophical world. You know what he said? He said JTB is not enough. Wow. He said that he can demonstrate that having a belief which is both true and justified is not sufficient to have knowledge, and he put forth his case. He said, imagine two men are vying for a job, and the first man is told by the CEO he didn't get the job. He's disappointed and thinks back to when they were both sitting outside the CEO's office waiting to be interviewed, and he saw the other candidate counting the coins he had in his pocket, 10 coins in all. So he goes home disappointed, and you know what he tells his wife when he gets home? With a down look on his face, he said, the guy with the 10 coins in his pocket got the job. As it turns out, the CEO was wrong, and he actually was the one who got the job. He received a phone call where they apologized for their mistake, and they congratulated him for getting the job. He hung up the phone and told his wife immediately. She was excited. She wanted to celebrate, so she suggested they go to dinner to celebrate. He agreed, so he pulled out the cash and change he had in his pocket to make sure it was enough to pay for dinner before they left the house. He noticed something very interesting. In addition to the cash in his pocket, he too had exactly 10 coins in his pocket. So Edmund Gettier argued that when he told his wife that the guy who had 10 coins in his pocket got the job, he had a justified true belief. But Gettier said, even though he had a justified true belief, this was not knowledge because he didn't know it was him who actually got the job. He thought it was the other guy. Thank you, philosophy. Where do we go from here? Well, interestingly enough, Gettier's case is still, to this day, today, hotly debated, and now people apparently enjoy this. They create their own version of them. And they're all now collectively referred to as Gettier cases, or some people refer to them as Gettier problems. I'm telling you right now, you go search YouTube, someone posted a video today about Gettier cases. One more famous Gettier case is the sheepdog case. Okay? So a man is driving by a field, and he notices a sheep standing in the field. But unbeknownst to him, it was actually a dog dressed like a sheep. He had no idea it was a dog, but he saw the animal, and he believed it was a sheep, and he just kept driving on, fully confident that there was a sheep in that field. Well, also, unbeknownst to him, there actually was a sheep in the field, but he couldn't see the actual sheep because it was behind a hill. So it said that he had a justified true belief that there was a sheep in the field because he actually believed that there was a sheep in the field. It was true that there was a sheep in the field, and it was justified because he saw an animal that looked just like a sheep. So he wasn't randomly guessing, oh, there must be a sheep in that field. So this Gettier case argues he had a justified true belief, but because it's a Gettier case, it means he did not have knowledge. And so if we think about it, he never saw a sheep in the field, and he was mistaken thinking that the animal he saw was a sheep. So it kind of sounds like he didn't have knowledge. So is Edmund Gettier right? What gives? Well, I think Gettier was correct that defining knowledge as a justified true belief is incorrect. I 100% agree with him on that. But I think Gettier went the wrong direction. You see, Gettier said a justified true belief is not enough for knowledge, meaning we need to add to the JTB theory of knowledge. I too think that the JTB theory is wrong, but I think we need to go the other way and remove something from the JTB theory of knowledge. It's fascinating, but it's very hard to find somebody today. I don't want to say impossible because I could spend more time on this, but it's very hard to find someone today that is okay or open to reducing the JTB theory of knowledge. Almost everything I read, watch, listen to on the topic, they either want to simply keep the justified true belief theory or they want to add to it. This idea of taking something away is seemingly non-existent. It's as if JTB is essentially the consensus, and Gettier has convinced a lot of people that we need to figure out what exactly is this missing piece that we need to add to JTB to finally, once and for all, figure out what knowledge actually is. Sometimes the most obvious thing is right in front of you, but you can't see it. And what I'm about to say is wildly controversial. When I tell people, especially philosophers and epistemologists, what I'm about to tell you, they think I'm insane. And by the way, if this hasn't been interesting or fascinating to you thus far, I will be tying all of this into Christianity in a really cool way, so just hang in there with me. I'm going to argue that a true belief is all you need for knowledge. So the whole justification piece is what has complicated the matter, and in my opinion, it's not necessary. So I'm suggesting we go from JTB to TB. Now, I think this will make sense to you as well. Remember that I said at the beginning that I disagree with a lot of philosophers because I think common sense is valuable and should be used in determining things like knowledge, what we're discussing today. But this idea of bringing common sense and intuition into philosophical ideas is kind of frowned upon big time. So, knowledge is simply this, a true belief. That's it. That's what knowledge is. If you believe something, and if what you believe is true, you have knowledge. You can say, I know something. So let's deal with the arguments against what I'm suggesting, against my position, and then let's apply this to the cases that I've mentioned already. Let's start with the Gettier cases. So remember, Gettier cases argue that justified true beliefs are present in the example, and there is still no knowledge. So if I'm going to argue that all you need is a true belief in order to know something, then certainly I should be arguing that Gettier cases are knowledge, right? Not so fast. Let's take a closer look. When the man told his wife that the guy with 10 coins in his pocket got the job, and that turned out to be a true belief, was that knowledge? It was not. But why not, Will? You just said it was a true belief, and you're telling us that a true belief is what knowledge is. Was it a true belief? It was not. When he told his wife that the man with 10 coins in his pocket got the job, he did not believe that it was some random man with 10 coins in his pocket. No, he just didn't remember the guy's name. He was literally telling his wife with the statement, the man with 10 coins got the job, that the other guy who was also interviewing for the job is the one who got the job. That's what he was communicating. That's what he was saying. And that was a false belief. You see, his statement and therefore his belief, those are inextricably tied to the other man. Just because he didn't mention the name to his wife and instead described him as the guy with 10 coins in his pocket, that does not negate the reality of the situation and the reality of his belief. Hopefully that's crystal clear. His belief was not true, it was false, as he believed the other guy got the job, and that's what he was communicating to his wife. What about the sheepdog? Well, again, this may appear to have been a true belief at first, but this too ended up being a false belief. He did not just believe that there was a sheep in the field. He believed that the animal he saw with his own eyes was the sheep. That's a false belief. The animal he saw with his eyes was a dog, not a sheep. So again, his belief that there was a sheep in the field, that belief is inextricably tied to the dog that he saw and thought was a sheep. He didn't just believe there was a sheep in the field. No, he believed the dog he saw was a sheep. That is a false belief. Now let's get to a harder one. How about the gumballs in the jar and the competition to guess how many are in the jar? Does this mean that someone who correctly guesses how many gumballs are in the jar has knowledge because I'm saying that knowledge is only a true belief? No. Why not, you ask? Well, he had a belief, and it ended up turning out to be true. But wait, did he really have a belief? In my studies, which are far from exhaustive, I've noticed something incredibly fascinating. Justification is what gets discussed the most in conversations surrounding the JTB theory of knowledge. but I never see discussions on what a belief is. The B of JTB. It seems to be assumed by these people in these discussions that we all just know and agree what a belief is. This is stunning. It's as if it's as if all someone needs to do is literally say the word believe, and it's immediately accepted. They have a belief. How about that? But that's not true. Thanks to Brian's incredible sermon 4 weeks ago on the topic of belief, we have what I think is a proper definition of a belief. A belief is a concept discerned or perceived to be true. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that a belief is true by default. No, a belief is something that is believed to be true. And so if you do not believe something is true, you actually don't have a belief. Now, this is really important, and I want to make sure everyone is following here. We're finally getting to the good stuff, okay? We use words in the English language all the time, like believe, but that doesn't inherently mean that we're talking about an actual belief. Again, an actual belief is something discerned or perceived to be true. So when someone says something like, I believe he said he was going to join us for lunch today, that's probably not a belief. The word believe in that context is actually communicating what? Doubt. That's communicating doubt. The phrase, I believe he said he was going to be here, actually means, I'm pretty sure he said he was going to be here, but I don't remember exactly. That's what the word believe means in that context. On the other hand, if they were certain that he said he would join them for lunch, they wouldn't use the word believe. They would say something like, he definitely said he would be here. Or, I'm positive he said he was joining us today. Now, language is fluid, right? Language is incredibly fluid. I am not saying that people shouldn't use the English word believe when they have doubt. But today, what are we talking about? Today, we're now talking about the ontology of a belief. That's what we're talking about. Ontology just means we're talking about the nature of something. So we're talking about the actual nature of a belief. And so we have to be careful and not merely assume that when someone utters the word believe, that it means it's actually a belief that they hold. There are other words that can be used to communicate doubt. Some examples would be think, thought, even hope, right? Those words do a better job at expressing the reality that the person speaking is not confident in the reality of what they are communicating. So imagine instead they said, I think he said he was coming, or I thought he said he was going to join us today, or I hope I'm remembering right that today was the day he said he was joining us. Since a belief is something that someone actually believes is true, we need to dig a little deeper when someone uses the word believe to find out if it's actually a belief or rather something they just have some level of confidence in. So how do we know if someone, even ourselves, actually believes something is true? Meaning, no doubt whatsoever. Absolutely true. Well, there's a test, and it's not going to make you feel comfortable. But this test is a pretty good test to cut to the chase and to help you figure out very quickly if you actually believe something or if you just think something may be true or is likely to be true. Here's the test. Would you risk your life on it? Meaning, if you're wrong, would you let someone kill you? That's the test. That ups the ante, doesn't it? Raise your hands right now, please, and keep them up. How many of you think that your front door on your house is locked right now? Please keep them up. Great. Pretty much the whole room. Keep them up, please. How many of you would bet your life on it? Meaning if we go and check and it's actually unlocked, you would be put to death. All right, so we have about half put their hands down. So those of you who still have your hand up, and you can put it down now, assuming you actually would risk your life on this, you actually believe that your front door is locked right now. You actually have a belief. The rest of you, and I think some of you that kept your hands up would change your mind, you don't actually have a belief that your front door is locked right now. You just think it's most likely the case that it's locked. You're pretty sure you locked it, but you don't know if you can trust your memory. You're also, now that your life's on the line, you're considering other things, right? What if your kids unlocked it after you locked it? You just lost your life. What if you're literally considering just off-the-wall ideas? I mean, consider my question. I asked you if your front door is locked right now. I didn't ask you if you locked it this morning. So if someone broke into your house and unlocked the door while you've been sitting here at church, you would just lose your life. That is how we know if you have a belief. This gets to the nature of belief. Why does this matter? Why am I making such a big deal about this? Here is why. The Bible says in Romans 10:9, if you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved. If you believe that God raised Jesus from the dead, you will be saved. Here is my question for all of you. Do you really believe that God raised Jesus from the dead? It's easy to tell people, yes, I'm a Christian and I believe Jesus was raised from the dead. But do you really believe? You see, the fact that people today use the word believe so offhandedly, that hasn't done anyone any favors. People all across the country today, you know what they're all going to say? You know what people across the country are going to say today? They're going to say they believe their favorite football team is going to win. I can hear it now. I believe we're going to win today. No, you don't. No, you don't. You think your team is going to win. You are confident your team is going to win. You are hopeful that your team is going to win, but you don't believe it. The way the word believe has come to be used so flippantly in daily conversation is in direct opposition to the Bible. Going back to Romans 10:9, if you believe in your heart that God has raised Jesus from the dead, you will be saved. Does this mean if you think it's pretty sure Jesus rose from the dead, you will be saved? Does it mean if you're pretty confident that Jesus was raised from the dead, you will be saved? No, it does not. This is saying if you believe Jesus rose from the dead, you will be saved. This simple word believe is asking for way more than people realize. This word is asking you to be willing to die for your belief, because that is the test to whether or not you actually believe something. A deep dive into epistemology and a look at what knowledge actually is brought me somewhere I would have never expected. And that's to an understanding of what a belief actually is and what it really means to believe something. It showed me that when God asks us to believe in him, it means with absolute confidence. So much that we would be willing to give our life for our belief. Now I fully realize why the apostles gave their lives for their faith. It's because they truly believed. In Acts 21, they were pleading with Paul to not go to Jerusalem. And his response to them was, I am ready not only to be bound, but also to die at Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus. He truly believed. So what is knowledge? Knowledge is simply a true belief. For decades or longer, epistemologists and philosophers have been thinking they need to add to the justified true belief theory of knowledge when they should have realized that they should be removing the J from the JTB equation if they understood what a belief actually is. The Bible has contained the answer the entire time. It's been right in front of us. For nearly 2,000 years, the Bible has told us what it actually means to believe and therefore what knowledge is. Notice in John 6:69, also we have come to believe and know that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. There it is. They believed, truly believed, and therefore knew, they had knowledge that Jesus was the Son of God. And this was only knowledge because their belief was true, but more importantly, they actually believed it. I want to encourage you, and I want to challenge you to check yourself. Do you really, really believe Jesus was raised from the dead? Are you willing to die for your belief? Or do you currently merely have a level of confidence, some level of confidence, that Jesus rose from the dead? Because I have to say this, if you are not willing to actually die for this, you don't have a belief. My goal with this sermon was to help others experience what I have in this epistemological journey and to better understand what God is actually asking for when he tells us to believe in order to be saved. And so with this proper understanding of the nature of belief, you can reach a point where you have the confidence to declare that you indeed have knowledge, but more importantly, knowledge concerning your faith and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Job did not have Plato. And guess what? He didn't need Plato to proclaim this. For I know that my Redeemer lives. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we come to you today, and we're just so thankful for everything you've done for us. You've given us a mind. You've given us freedom. We have the free will to research and study and try to understand your creation. That's what we're doing. And learning about your creation helps us understand more about you. And we have to thank you so much for your word. Your word contains seemingly unending wisdom and truth. And so many people today, especially Christians, do not understand your word. And they don't realize the power that it has. And so throughout our lives, I pray that we remember when we're trying to figure something out, when we're stuck, when we're struggling, when we need help, that we don't forget the most important tool we have is your word that you gave to us. Pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.